Today, we're going to be talking about what the 2018 midterm election results could mean for the 2020 election. So we are 143 days away from the midterm elections, and it's pretty much creeping up on us with summer going by. And we're going to go ahead and see how this would make an impact on the 2020 election. So first of all, we're going to look at today in 2010. So today is June 16th, 2018. Let's see where that was back all the way in 2010 during the Republican wave year. June 16th, the Republicans were up by 1.3% and finished off the year at 9.4%. This is very telling. Back then, the Democrats were not really down per se. They could have lost in the national poll by this margin and not have lost the House because they had such a large majority in the House of Representatives. And now that we see where the Republicans stood on June 16th by 1.3%, which then it narrowed down the next few days down to 0.4%, and then eventually led up to 9.3%. That is a considerable difference. If the Democrats followed that trend, they would be ahead by 15.9% by the end of 2018, and the Republicans underperformed, meaning if they underperform again, we could we could possibly see an 18% margin in the national popular vote for the Democrats. It's not likely to happen, though, and it's probably not going to happen. It's just something to point out that at this point in time, the Republicans were narrowly ahead compared to where, if we look at the Democratic generic poll today, they've been consistently ahead. If we look at the 2010 polling, Democrats were ahead by double digits early on. They kept leading, then boom, Republicans take over, and then it gets down close again, and then all of a sudden Republicans start off their wave year and finish off at 9.4%. We look at the race for Congress now, we don't see a Republican ahead of a Democrat in any of these opinion polls when it comes to the average. I mean, the Democrats did have their peak, but they're likely to gain in poll numbers by the end of 2018 with people making up their mind and the undecided vote going down, and it will likely affect the Democrats in a positive way, especially looking at the approval rating of the president. Yes, it is going up, but it's not making an implication on the generic ballot poll, which is something that's very interesting. And the 2018 midterm results are going to be a very telling sign of what we see in the 2020 election. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 2016 election results. So clearly, if the Democrats won in the 2020 election by a 15-point margin, pretty much almost every state would be blue. However, looking at this map, the Democrats are definitely going to have to target some key races. But let's just go ahead and look at the 2018 House map and where the majority of these toss-up states are. So if we're looking at these, most of these are either in swing states or Democratic states. We look to the Northeast, Democratic territory, toss-up districts. Look over to Minnesota, toss-up territory. And then if we look at the swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, I mean, these states have close races, and that's something that needs to be noted. We're not seeing it happen in states like Oklahoma or Mississippi or Alabama, rarely in Georgia, none in Tennessee. Okay, maybe one in Kentucky in the 6th district, none in Indiana. South Carolina, no. And then if we look at how partisan and how Republican these states have gotten, they have become less competitive races, where if we look to states like Minnesota, which voted for Hillary Clinton, Illinois, which voted for Hillary Clinton, California, which voted for Hillary Clinton, Washington, Oregon, all voted for Hillary Clinton, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. I mean, a number of these states, they clearly have a pattern. Republican states are not having competitive races because they pretty much are, number one, they're gerrymandered, not saying it only happens on the Republican side, but it's definitely prominent on both political parties, just saying that it's a little bit more shown because this is a Democratic wave year. But if we're looking at the map, we see it in Democratic states, which is not good news for Republicans. So let's say the Democrats somehow take the majority of seats in Pennsylvania or even do better, and they win in the generic they win in the generic vote in that state overall. We could see a Pennsylvania flip in 2020. I mean, if we look at the swing, let me pull up the House map. If we look at the swing and we see Democrats improving drastically in Pennsylvania, we could land Pennsylvania and predict it as, I mean, I could personally. There's no we, but you could predict it for the Democrats. Or if you go over to a state like Michigan, I could predict that for the Democrats if we see such a drastic swing, and it would be defined and it would be backed up by information, because if we see a Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin flip, a number of these states have competitive races, that's not going to be good news for Republicans. I don't know why I still have the independent feature on. Let me turn that off. It does not look good, but Michigan goes to the Democrats. So if these three states alone flip to the Democratic Party and they have such a drastic swing in the 2018 midterms, it could spell out bad news for the Republicans in general. We go over to Iowa, if this one goes to the Democrats, they're going to win in other places as well. Let's say Florida has a drastic Democratic turn, North Carolina, Ohio, Arizona, Texas, even. These states are probably not going to flip, but it's just interesting to see how these states could make an impact. How the 2018 midterms in these states could make an impact on the 2020 election. So Arizona actually does have a great possibility of having a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, representing the state of Arizona, of course, which could definitely be beneficial to the Democrats, because if they can do that, they could win the state overall. Or if they do it in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the only 3 states they truly need to win, and just hold on to the others, which shouldn't be too hard, it's probably going to remain, it's actually probably going to flip to the Democrats. And that's the only 3 states. You can forget Ohio or Iowa or Arizona or North Carolina or Florida for anything. You could forget New Hampshire, or you could keep New Hampshire and forget Nevada. I mean, as long as the Democrats are winning in the Rust Belt, they're likely to win the election. And if these other states go as well, we could see a very big referendum against the president. If we're looking at these 2018 midterm polls, the Democrats are probably going to tick up, considering, number one, they're undervalued in generic ballot polls. The 2016 results are not proof that polls are wrong. I hate that point so much because I see it in my comment section so much, and you fail to realize that, number one, the polls predicted Trump would win Nevada in 2016, so that was wrong, yes, but it favored the Democrats, okay? Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania were the only 3 states that were wrong by opinion polling, and all of them, except for Wisconsin, were within the margin of error. So you cannot say that the polls were wrong. Yes, you could say the media spin it into a way that would make it seem like the Democrats were going to win, but the polls were not wrong. They were just at a point where they could have swung either way, thus the margin of error. The margin of error, meaning they could have made a mistake within these percentage points. It wasn't caught in Wisconsin. I don't think anyone thought Wisconsin was going to the Republicans, but they caught it in Michigan. They caught it in Pennsylvania. They caught it in Iowa. They caught it in Nevada. They caught it in Ohio. They caught it in Florida, North Carolina. Every other swing state was right, except for Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. 4 states. And Nevada actually favored the Democrats. So Nevada wasn't in the Democratic column on the day of the 2016 election. So the idea that the polls are wrong, no, that's not right. You're most likely just denying the evidence in front of you because you want it to favor your point, and that's just not how we do things. That's not how I look at things. That's not how I try to twist these polls, because these polls are data. They are going to give you information about an election, and you're going to have to take them whether you like them or not. Just because they don't agree with your standpoint doesn't mean they're fake automatically. And then you're going to be the first person to take another opinion poll and say, this one must be real because it shows Trump is being approved. Like if you take Rasmussen and then you take their opinion poll, but you don't trust the one from Fox, CNN, ABC, New York Times, blah, 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 blah. You can't just say that those polls are wrong because you do not agree with them. That's not how we do things, and that's not how you should do things. But I know some of you are still going to do it, and actually possibly get angry at me for that point. But we're going to go on with this video. So looking at the Democratic ballot for the 2018 midterms, they're probably going to tick up a little bit. They're not going to reach that 15-point margin, but if we see flips in a number of these states in the House elections, we could likely see these flips in the 2020 election. I'm not going to talk about Montana much. I'm not going to talk about Virginia or Kentucky or West Virginia because these states are not ones that really need to be noted. Okay, we're not going to see a Montana flip in the 2020 election. We're not going to see a West Virginia or Kentucky or Virginia flip to the GOP. Even though they may have possibilities of flipping, we could see a Georgia flip, okay? That would be extremely drastic. We're probably not going to see a Texas flip, but if we follow the trend of Republican and Democratic voters and turnout levels amongst them in primaries and how they're expected to go in the House elections, we're seeing the majority of these races being toss-ups in toss-up and Democratic states. Very little Republican states, or if they are swing Republican states, actually have competitive races. By swing Republican states, I mean the usual, the Rust Belt, Iowa, Ohio, Florida, which used to be Democratic states, and they'll probably be Democratic states in the future just based off demographic changes. But when we're looking at, I don't know why it keeps refreshing, like every moment it refreshes, but when we're looking at the map, we're noticing a trend that it's mainly in Democratic and swing state areas, and that's not good for the GOP because they were able to get their voters out in 2016 and win in a number of these races, or we're seeing a referendum against the president in super close states such as Florida or Wisconsin or Michigan, and the list goes on and on and on. and we're not seeing good news for the GOP. If they saw swing districts in places like Indiana or Missouri or Tennessee, yes, then it could become something that should be notable for the GOP in their favor, because Trump is well liked there. He could come there, hold a rally, and be positively viewed. If he goes to a state like California, he's going to need to choose that, tiny area in California and hold a rally there, and still then he's going to face some opposition. If he goes to states that he was extremely liked and it still is extremely liked, then he's probably going to make a positive impact. But he can't go to California and expect Republicans to win in the generic ballot. Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying generic ballot. In the congressional elections there, just because he came to California. It could work in Tennessee. It could work in Alabama. It could work in Mississippi. But it's not going to work in states like California. It may work in Arizona, which probably won't. It won't work in Minnesota. It won't work in New York. It will have little impact on the Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin races. And it's really because of the fact that, number one, he isn't approved well in a number of these states. Almost all these toss-up states, he has a negative approval rating in. Kansas, not so much. Arkansas, not so much. But yes, in Georgia, in North Carolina, in Virginia, in Ohio, in Iowa, in the entire Rust Belt, Texas even, has a lower approval rating for the president than Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, the list goes on. And then California, the Democratic states. I mean, I just listed swing states. And then we move into the Democratic states where he's even more hated. We're going to see a drastic referendum against the president if these trends keep up. And if we see that happen now in 2018, we'll likely see it in 2020 just based off how people have voted. What we saw in 2010 didn't necessarily correlate with what we saw in 2012 because 2010 was a special case. We are seeing more Democratic voters enter the United States, enter the voting bases, and that's not because more people are necessarily immigrating. We're also seeing it because of drastic changes in the way people view society and the way that people have voted or not voted in previous election years. So you go over to Michigan, a number of people in the African-American community did not vote in the 2016 election, whether it be they thought Hillary Clinton would win or they just didn't feel like they needed to vote. We're seeing new voter rolls. We're seeing new people come out and vote, and that's not good news for the GOP because in order for them to win, they need to appeal to a very specific base, which they do very well every time. They need to hold on to the white base, and that's something that's not going to continue happening just based off the continuation of events that we've seen in 2016 and 2012 and 2008. Yes, Trump did make a change positive for the GOP, but eventually he's going to end up screwing them because he's going to annihilate their base into the soon-to-be minority of the United States, which is not going to be good news. As soon as these minorities now come out and vote, that's not going to be good for the Republican Party because they cannot appeal to these type of voters unless they change their platform, which they likely will do. Parties survive these type of things. The Democrats survived it when they lost the South, but we're not going to see the Republicans, win by such large margins anymore. We're not going to see really any political party win by such large margins. The only possibility that it would have is the Democrats winning 373 electoral votes at most. We're never going to see such a drastic Reagan Revolution type Nixon win, but when we're looking at demographic trends and how things have gone, the Democrats are heavily favored because they're getting more people out to vote in not only their areas but in swing districts, whereas the Republicans are dispersing themselves more evenly, which is why they are doing very well in rural areas. If those states were urbanized, they would most likely be Democratic states. If you go to a place like Houston, it's drastically different than from the rest of Texas. Or if you go to a place like Miami, it's drastically different from the rest of Florida. But overall, the 2018 midterms are going to have a drastic effect on the 2020 election. Donald Trump will know where and where not to go and where the voting bases are greatest for the Democrats and where we could see possibilities of flipping in 2020. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll probably get another video out today.